how can you tell if a firm is going to sell? What are the signs? It's incredible what's gone on in the marketplace over the course of the last 5 to 10 years.
What are some of the things that a smaller firm could provide that a larger firm can't as effectively?
Some advisors want something different based upon the sweat equity they put in their business. They don't want to be treated like everyone else. I always say wholesalers are the priests and the rabbis of this business.
I don't think a lot of financial advisors know the amount of money that asset management firms need to pay just in order to be on a large independent broker-dealer shelf, where, I mean, potentially at a smaller firm, you just have so much more accessibility.
We get this question a lot, and advisors should be asking the question, but I really want to frame it the right way. Advisors that have been displaced, most advisors that are asking that question have been the recipient of being burned or having their firm sold out from underneath them. And to point the finger and say that smaller firms are more susceptible to this really would ignore a lot of the data over the last 5 years.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today. While there's no arguing that larger independent broker-dealers and RIAs have some significant advantages out there in the marketplace, it's not a one-size-fits-all model for everybody. At the same time, there's significant benefits for financial advisors at the smaller and mid-sized broker-dealers and RIAs as well. And just wanted to talk about that a little bit to get today. The goal of this podcast has always been just to give unbiased information to advisors at their pace about the pros and the cons of all types of different business models and options. And I thought a great person to bring on the podcast today is Jamie McKay. He's the president and COO of Strategic Financial Alliance. And he was generous enough with his time just to talk about his experience working at a mid-sized firms and some of the benefits that a financial advisor might want to consider as they're looking out there in the marketplace. Jamie, I really appreciate you hopping on today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jamie, I've known you for a long time, and I think one of the big benefits of having you on this podcast today is you just have a really broad experience in the industry. Can you just briefly discuss your background and how it could relate to this conversation?
Sure. So, it's hard to believe I'm coming into my 30th year in the industry.
Nice.
I started in the industry in the mid 90s, and I started in sales and distribution. So I was a wholesaler for a long period of time, originally starting in New England, migrating down to the South at the turn of the millennia. And for a long time, I'd worked with advisors, gravitated to working with independent financial advisors, and really kind of found my calling there. When my kids got a little bit older, I decided that I did not want to be traveling quite as much away from home. And I decided to look for a different career. And so about 7 years ago, I found a firm that had been in the business at that time for about 13 years. And I'd known some of their advisors. And it's kind of funny, just like children, you can tell a lot about the parents by meeting the children. I knew a lot about this firm through its advisors, and came and met with the CEO and founder of the firm, Clive Sloven, and the executive team that was there. Just loved it. Originally just to do business development. That's where you and I met in recruiting advisors and that kind of holistic relationship. About 2 years ago, I was promoted to chief operating officer as my boss is looking to obviously have a succession plan. And then last month was promoted to president. So it's been a great opportunity for me to manage the relationships of the advisors that place their faith in the firm and the people that are here. And it is not without a certain amount of responsibility, looking at how a smaller firm can deliver something that's unique compared to all of the large firms and opportunities that are out there. And we kind of do our thing.
I appreciate it, Jamie. So just a little bit about your background in in the wholesaling world. You kind of covered the gamut, right? Wirehouses, big independents, smaller independents, and you were working pretty intimately with all of those advisors, obviously.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Corey, is as you might imagine, right? I always say wholesalers are the priests and the rabbis of this business, right?
Yeah.
So as a from a recruiting standpoint, a wholesaler will hear from an advisor very often if they're dissatisfied, if they're looking a lot sooner than a recruiter will. So
Mhm.
yeah, some of my conversations that naturally bled into business development, recruiting, looking at having a holistic relationship with advisors that would serve me forward in my career. Yeah, that started definitely in the wholesaling years. But
Awesome.
all channels, wirehouses, banks, regionals, and independents.
Great. That's going to be super valuable to this conversation today. So as we discussed, Jamie, you've been in the industry for a really long time. When we're going through the process and helping financial advisors um, explore their options, help understand what else is out there, a lot of times, especially when a financial advisor comes from a larger organization,
Mhm.
sometimes they feel more comfortable just immediately going to a larger organization just because it's what they know. And as we discussed
Sure.
in the beginning of this call, there's obviously some strengths and benefits of some larger firms, but it's also our job to help pull financial advisors out of their comfort zone and based on what they're trying to accomplish, help them look at some other firms that maybe they wouldn't have considered in the first place. And just for our listeners today, with the experience that you've had working with larger firms, that you have working with strategic financial alliance, in your opinion, what are some of the things that a smaller firm could provide that a larger firm can't as effectively?
So, look, it's incredible what's gone on in the marketplace over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, right? The largest firms out there, as I call them, the mega firms now, because they're even beyond large, uh, they've done a they've done a great job of being able to serve the masses. But just like just like in the example of Walmart, right? When you get to a certain size, you can serve the masses, but there are still people that are not served, that want something different, that want a more customized approach. So I would tell you that has been dramatized, and more advisors are finding right displaced by this. So you've got the rub. You can be a small firm that has the desire to provide personalized service but doesn't have enough scale to really be able to provide the resources. And then you have the large firm that can provide a lot of the resources, but it really can't spend any time or slow down to stop and make the personalized experience that so many advisors are looking for. So I kind of talk about that, not small but smaller firm is kind of in that quote unquote that Goldilocks, that just right spot. And there's so many different things that you look at that are, I guess I would say, resonating with advisors. So number one, you've got the ability to have a personalized relationship with the advisor. So if you look at FINRA's definition of firms, you're looking at about 150 or smaller is a small firm. 150 to 500 is a medium-sized firm, and anything over 500 is a large firm, right? So we're right at that cusp at SFA Partners, which is obviously a broker dealer, a corporate RA, and a standalone SEC registered RA by the name of Strategic Blueprint. We're at about 150 advisors, so right on that cusp. Um, every smaller firm is trying to get larger, but that's the real distinction. Remember, it's trying to get larger, but not trying to get large. So you've got the ability to have a relationship. We boast that we know 99% of our advisors by their sound of their voice on the phone. What does that allow? That allows for deep partnering, the ability to know the advisor's book of business at the granular level, really see the advisor's vision through their eyes. Larger firms are great on providing kind of a business model for advisors to follow. Smaller firms are better to being, putting their ear to the ground and listening to what the advisor wants to accomplish. So I call that kind of real world constant state of active consulting.
Yeah.
You really don't find that occurring at the larger firms. And this bleeds over not only to the compliance standpoint, right? Of advisors being able to proactively ask questions, have relationships with their supervisors. Very often we're not the first firm to say no. We'll ask the advisor what they're trying to accomplish, and most of the often we'll be able to say, you can't do that this way, but this is the way that you would do it. So that active partnership is in compliance. It's in the area of sourcing custom investment solutions that a larger firm just wouldn't have the appetite to do some of the smaller offerings that a smaller firm could do. And some of it are just embracing the advisor's vision for this business. Corey, I give this an example. Gentleman joined us a few years back from New York. In fact, that gentleman you had referred, um, I asked him, he had loads of choices coming from LPL. Why did you end up choosing our firm? He said, you know what? Of all the firms I talked to, you seem the most interested in what I wanted to do for my business. Really embraced my idea, my vision. And that's the difference, right? Is if a larger firm is embracing their vision, a smaller firm could really be embracing and partnering on the advisor's vision. And that's probably the most distinguishing feature.
So I want to dig into, each of the things that you just mentioned a little bit more granularly, but, every firm wants to grow. You mentioned that in the beginning of this, but,
Yep.
not every firm wants to grow for the sake of growing. I mean, there's some firms out there that will take a $10 million producer, a $50,000 trailing 12 production producer, a 401k producer, a, annuity only producer. There's some firms out there that want to grow much more strategically. They
Mhm.
want really nice financial advisors that fit their niche, that have a great personality, that aren't super, high maintenance. They want them to be a good cultural fit at the end of the day as well. And then on the other side, I'm not saying all big firms are like this, but some larger firms, they just grow for the sake of growing. I mean, they'll take on pretty much every financial advisor out there. And you can't be all things to all people and have a truly, amazing service experience for your clients. It's just not possible. It's not possible in broker dealer world. It's not
Mhm.
possible for financial advisors. I mean, imagine if you're an advisor and you're taking on every single client that comes to you, regardless of, fit or investable asset size.
Sure.
It's a recipe for not an optimal service experience.
Yeah, you can't do it. I mean, the reality is from a smaller firm standpoint, if you're going to partner with the advisor, you're looking for a good big give and take on someone that is going to fit. Um, you are doing probably a little bit more on whether or not there'll be a cultural fit.
Yeah.
Talking to an advisor last week, and not going to pick on any large firm, but he said, this large firm, you start by entering all your information onto a website, all your financials, everything, and they'll actually kind of quote you a deal based upon intrinsic objective things, which is fine, right? But you know what that made me think of, Corey? Made me think of CarMax,
Hmm.
right? I mean, a lot of people use CarMax, but some people still want the ability to go in and actually talk to someone and be like, hey, you know what? I've kept my automobile. I've kept it well maintained. They want to be able to get a better, more personalized, more customized deal. So again, I can't underscore the fact that there's nothing wrong with the larger firms or their model. They're doing great. Just doesn't serve everybody. Some advisors want something different based upon the sweat equity they put in their business. They don't want to be treated like everyone else.
100%. Um, so you were featured in an article the other day that I read that Andy Cowball wrote that I thought it was kind of the impetus to have this conversation today. But just in that article, he talked about like the four main ways that a smaller broker dealer could potentially come out on top. And they
Mhm.
were, compliance, support, culture, and also just investment availability. And if it's okay with you, I just wanted to
Sure.
talk about those main four areas and
Sure.
just maybe some like specific real life examples that an advisor can come from this podcast today, just come understanding how a smaller firm could potentially pull out, ahead there. Just from a compliance standpoint, the
Sure.
first one, Jamie,
Sure.
thank you. Um,
So let's kind of talk about sequence. I kind of underscored this before. It's amazing to me. I tell this story a lot. There was a video when I was first interviewing for the job to come to SFA Partners. On the video, the head of supervision was on that video saying, we start with the premise that our advisors are always trying to do what's in the best interest of their clients, and our job is to help them accomplish that. That was such a refreshing type of philosophy in this industry, and that's something that permeates our organization. So if you want to talk from a compliance standpoint, it is that idea that the advisor is trying to serve the client, that the company itself is aligned. Uh, you're not getting, Corey, you're not getting a lot of what you hear every single day from advisors that are shunning the larger firms, which is they're kind of managing to the lowest common denominator. I'm caught in the crosshairs on so many different things, not because of anything I'm doing, but because rules they have to put in place to what you referenced earlier. They're taking, $100,000 production advisor and myself as an $800,000 production advisor that has a staff that are doing things the right way. We're having to put rules into effect so that they can manage those people at the bottom. And you just don't see that at smaller firms where, as you mentioned before, there is kind of this homogeneous group of advisors that are what I call, kind of the good to great or the great to excellent model.
Yeah.
They're already seasoned advisors. Most advisors that come to our company had already been at least one to two other firms. It's kind of funny, right? Is get people that have a financial divorce of that effect very, very quickly. They know what they don't want in a relationship, and so that's why I would say, the difference between a larger firm and a smaller firm. They might take newer advisors. They might take people that don't have a lot of experience in certain things. They might take an advisor. Think about it. A lot of advisors that come from the wirehouse channel that have never experienced working an independent model, they will gravitate to a large firm first. So there's not only the added effect of them making the move, but then there's the culture shock of working as an independent. So a smaller firm, from a compliance standpoint, really can lean in, have that personalized relationship, be able to know how the advisor does business, so that they're able to troubleshoot and really be able to answer questions and serve the advisor far better.
Yeah. So I mean, from a compliance standpoint, I try to tell my clients this all the time. There's a humongous difference between what the SEC says you're allowed to do as an individual financial advisor and
Yeah,
what, a 5, 10, 15,000 person firm interprets that as their legal and compliance team and what they're comfortable supervising across all of those advisors. And typically, the larger the firm, the more tight those guardrails, have to come in. So I speak with financial advisors all the time and say,
sure.
Corey, I just want to be left alone to do what's right for my clients. I've never had a ding on my U5.
Yeah,
I do the right thing. My clients are happy, and I'm just running into compliance things, whether it's from a marketing standpoint, maybe their threshold for annuities or insurance or small cap stocks or alternative investment threshold is like way too small, and they're constantly having to ask for compliance, even though this is something that their advisors are asking for. I mean, those are things that I run into where sometimes at a smaller firm, when there's 150 financial advisors, and each one of those financial advisors by their name, how they run their business, things could potentially run a lot smoother, and not that compliance is lax. You
it's
just have
not.
the confidence in your advisors to, let the reins go a little bit.
It's not even letting the reins go a little bit, but I'll give you an example. How do you manage 10,000 plus advisors from a compliance standpoint? You have to have parameters, rules, right? You have to be able to follow those, and those rules have to be pretty immutable, right? Because of how many different supervisors that you have to maintain. A smaller firm can really have guidelines, and those guidelines can provide the supervisor the basis to have a conversation. But see, that's what's missing at a lot of other larger firms is in cases of questions, our conversations happening, on a pick up the phone basis, or is someone getting business kicked back as a NIGO? Are they getting what I would call a very impersonal email saying that this has been kicked back because of XYZ? Is there any conversation, dialogue, education, or or was there enough of a relationship that the supervisor knew that something was a challenge and reached out? So it's proactive versus reactive, hard cookie cutter rules versus guidelines. That's what you're going to see.
Love it. Thanks for providing some color. Um,
Sure.
what about from a support standpoint? I feel like this is kind of like the same answer. But from a support standpoint, servicing 150 financial advisors versus 5, 10, 15,000. I mean, what are some real world examples there that an advisor could take home that would be a benefit aligning with a firm like yours?
So, for example, right, if a large firm has posed a question where the advisor wants to do something from a support standpoint, and the firm has never done it before, with a larger firm, that could be, like moving the Titanic, right? You have to be able to do the due diligence and really see, not is it effective, not will it be make a difference for that particular advisor, but they have to be able to macro that for the entire audience of their advisors. So very often from a larger firm standpoint, if it's a great idea, but they don't believe that they can employ it, or it would be, I guess I would say, adopted by the masses, then they'd be less inclined to do it. Versus a smaller firm, they don't have the same litmus test to be able to say, unless we can do it for 1,000 advisors, we're not going to do it. And so I'll give you an example. Now this goes back, and a lot of firms are doing this now with no issues, but probably about 5 years back, we weren't, as a firm, doing a lot of structured notes. It's not something we'd done. Didn't mean that our advisors were doing something wrong, but being independent, our advisors were utilizing other things. We had an advisor come to the firm that had used structured notes at their last firm, and so immediately he said, "Look, would you do the due diligence on that? This is what I'm looking to do." And the answer was, if it's good for you and we think it would be good for others, whether or not we get immediate adoption or not, it's something that we'd put on the platform, and we did. And lo and behold, guess what? That we now do a substantial amount of structured notes on the advisory side as advisors talk. And that kind of leads me into the last one, which was kind of culture. Great example on that. So not only does the home office itself have great relationships with the advisors, but at a smaller firm, there's a much greater ability for advisor to advisor peer modeling. The way that I talk about it for advisors that are looking at us is, I said, look, our community, you're always going to be in a place either to be able to pick up ideas from somebody that's a mile down the road on the path that you're on, or to be able to share ideas with somebody that might be half a mile back from where you're currently standing. And so caring is sharing. With a community that's based upon that, you have the ability for advisors to share best practices in a much, much greater, higher velocity way. And so I'll give this as an example. Back at the beginning of COVID, we had that advisor that was, probably one of our younger advisors in his mid 30s. And he was on the same stage at one of our regional conferences with the number one producer in the firm. And the number one producer, they were talking about strategies to what to do for clients, that where you want to offer a certain amount of intrinsic guarantee. The older, more senior, seasoned advisor was talking about annuities, something that I'm familiar with, and how he's laddered annuities and how he's utilized annuities and income benefits and death benefits for clients to embed a certain amount of guarantee. This younger advisor on the stage talked about structured notes and how he's utilizing that. It was a great, great topic, and everyone at the conference got a lot from it. But the magic that happened, and the story that I want to tell, is after that, the more senior advisor, reached out to that advisor who happens to be in our backyard in Georgia and asked him if he'd be inclined to fly up to Pennsylvania to meet with his team. Lo and behold, here we are now, several years later. The number one firm for structured notes in our firm is that office in Pennsylvania. So advisors, teaching advisors, are like kids in school teaching other kids in school. They're going to learn much faster than they learn from the teacher.
That's great. And I know just through the due diligence process, the flexibility and the advisors, certain needs that advisors have had, you've made concessions and have worked through policies to make sure that like something would work for an advisor that would just never happen at a big firm. So that's been something I've been very impressed with.
So the last part that you were talking about, which was in that article, was really in the area of investment solutions, product, and due diligence.
Mhm.
And that really is something a smaller firm that does it well, that has put the resources, can do to really outflank what a lot of larger firms are just unwilling to do. And that is, have investment solutions that might serve only one or a handful of advisors versus something that you have to approve that will have massive. We do a certain percentage in our business overall, as a firm, with high net worth retail investors, and we have done for many years, for the 20 years of the firm's existence, had a portion and a specialty within the alternative investments category. Um, we have the ability to look at some private deals of which the size might only be 10 or $20 million of capital raised. A large firm, it's not even going to be worth them getting out of bed for that. But
Mhm.
our advisors that are looking to serve their clients can gain access to something like that here. That's a differentiator. To have quality due diligence and to have access to products that will give small independent advisors the ability to compete with the likes of JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley is a big deal, especially for that market of high net worth and ultra high net worth investor.
Yeah, I mean that makes a ton of sense. I don't think a lot of financial advisors know the amount of money that asset management firms need to pay just in order to be on a large independent broker dealer shelf where, I mean, potentially at a smaller firm, you just have so much more accessibility. So that's another humongous benefit for sure.
Yep.
Um, so I appreciate all of the examples that you gave, Jamie. Um, whenever I hear, whenever I talk with a financial advisor about a smaller firm, this is more of a hard question, especially when they're coming from a larger organization. They're talking
Mhm.
with larger firms. If they mention that they're speaking with a smaller firm, it's, why would you do that in this world of consolidation? That firm is going to sell in 2 years. That being said, that's not a blanket statement about all small firms. I see it every day. Can you just dive into
Oh,
that comment?
thank you so much for asking this question. Right, we get this question a lot, and advisors should be asking the question, but I really want to frame it the right way. Um, Advisors that have been displaced, most advisors that are asking that question have been the recipient of being burned or having their firm sold out from underneath them, right? And to point the finger and say that smaller firms are more susceptible to this really would it really would ignore a lot of the data over the last 5 years, right? A lot of the consolidation has really happened in some of the larger firms. So the real question that I'd like to answer, Corey, if you don't mind, which is, how can you tell if a firm is going to sell, right? What are the signs? Um, First of all, let me say that there's no firm on the planet, right, that doesn't have a price for which it would sell. So any firm that says, yeah, we're never going to sell, hasn't seen a price high enough. However, with that being said, there's a difference between a firm that is actively trying to and showing signs that it's packaging itself up to sell. Here are kind of the litmus tests. So number one, um, are they growing advisor headcount at all costs? Meaning, are they adding $10,000 a year producers? Are they adding, 20,000? Are they looking at advisors that have one, two, three, four, five, or the phone book worth of regulatory disclosures? Are they just interested in growing top line without respects to bottom line? That's kind of number one. Number two, right, is have they skeleton crewed out or consolidated service, right? One of the first things that you'll see is people getting laid off, or a firm that used to be made up of three firms now is being serviced by the back office of one firm, and everyone else is let go. Well, what does that do to the service quality advisors receive? The other, and this is one that you see a lot, is when some of the recruiting tactics use multiples of upfront money where it doesn't make any economic sense unless somebody down the road is going to be paying for that. So those are really the telltale things. I always tell an advisor, judge a company by its track record and what it's currently doing, rather less than by what it says it's going to do. But if you look at a firm that is, for example, for us, if that firm is adding things to its platform, if that firm is adding the next generation of management to the company, if that firm's service model is 3-to-1 back office to advisors, if they're putting key emphasis on running the business versus packaging it up to sell it, that's when you know that you're with the right firm, and that's regardless of size.
I love that. That's super helpful.
Thank
Jamie,
you.
why don't you just tell us a little bit about SFA
Sure, sure.
as a whole?
Sure. So SFA, SFA Partners is essentially a company composed of a broker dealer, which was originally founded over 21 years ago. It has its own corporate RIA, but then we also, back in 2017, created an SEC registered standalone RIA called Strategic Blueprint. And this is really utilizing top technology for advisors that really want to accentuate advisor as portfolio manager, use an institutional custodian, and have all the type of technology, CRM, Black Diamond, everything that you'd want to if you were having and creating your own RIA experience for your clients is what we wanted to create with Blueprint. And it's the fastest growing segment of our business. It's grown from 200 million to 400 million to 800 million to 1.6, and now we're resting somewhere around 2.6 billion, with only 57 advisors in Strategic Blueprint. So we think going forward, more and more advisors, Corey, are going to have that question about dropping completely a FINRA relationship. Although 80% of our advisors right now with Blueprint are hybrid, we have the availability for an advisor that wants to be advisory only. And I think over the next 10 years, I think we're going to see a lot of advisors kind of, ripping off the Band-Aid and making that decision. And the last part of SFA Partners is an insurance services division called SFA Insurance Services, which is powered by Pinnacle as our marketing organization out of Jacksonville, Florida. So you're getting the benefits as an independent advisor to be able to do the business in the area that best serves your clients, regardless if that's transactional by nature or if that is that's advice for fee.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Jamie. And where we've had success together thus far has been in Strategic Blueprint. And just one thing that I would mention, if let's say that your answer, to if a firm is going to sell is wrong, and financial advisors still have serious concerns about a firm, selling. If you're doing a significant amount of fee-based business and you're part of an RIA and they wind up selling to a less than ideal acquirer and you don't want to go along, once your assets are at a custodian like Schwab or Fidelity or whatever it may be, if you don't want to move along with your firm when they wind up selling, It's a one-page document, a change of ADV form to move to another RIA. You keep your client's data, passwords stay the same, the client portal stays the same. It's minimum disruption. So if you truly want the benefits of a smaller, a smaller firm, and you want that culture, you want the investment availability, you want the really consultative compliance, you can do so. And if anything bad ever happened, where they sold, the ripcord is extremely easy to pull, much easier than at an independent broker dealer. So that's just one other thing I wanted to add.
It's a great thing to stress, but remember that doesn't even mean, Corey, that doesn't even mean that the firm is selling or anything like that. It's simply with being with an institutional custodian, that's a skin in the game for the firm, right? Meaning, if they don't manage a relationship from a service and from an economic standpoint and from a technology standpoint, the advisor can always unplug and then plug in either to another ADV with somebody else, with a competitor, or they can plug into their own ADV at some point. So I always tell people, look, if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, the relationship is elongated. It's going to last a real long time. Our skin in the game is how unsticky you are to maintain your relationship with us if we're not delivering what you need. And I love that. I love that amount of accountability at a firm, because it's something that a large firm that has a corporate RA, they don't feel it in the same way.
Awesome. Jamie, I really appreciate you hopping on the phone. I think you added a ton of detail in terms of some of the benefits of a smaller firm. For the listeners of this, I'm not endorsing a large firm or a smaller firm. I just think it's really important through your due diligence process to try to take a look at all different types of firms and learn what you like and learn what you don't, and just constantly keep track of that along with someone like myself to just really help narrow down and get tactical in terms of what firms are is the right fit for you. The more that you look, the more that you learn, the more you're going to understand what you want, and the more targeted that we could get in our search. So be open-minded, and you definitely will not regret it throughout the search process. But Jamie, once again, I really appreciate the time. Super informative.
Thank you so much for having me, Corey. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.